Hey, what's up, bookworms? We are back with the first of a new segment on the channel called Author's Corner, where, hey, I'm not an author, but everyone else on this panel is. So I have a very, very stacked panel here. I'm very, very excited about this because there's three authors that I've gotten to know quite well as I've been doing this, as they've come along here and kind of become like superstars in the industry. And I can't wait to get into this. We're going to talk about novellas today, and I feel like why they're important. And I'm going to represent readers and why I feel like they're important to readers. Let's kind of go around the horn here first. Ladies first. From Northern Ireland, the one and the only Shauna Lawless. How are you this evening where you are?
Yes, I'm all good. Thanks very much. Thank you for inviting me on.
Of course, of course. And recently from Ireland. He's Ireland removed now. You guys know him. He's been on the channel a few times now. Author of The Bound and the Broken. This is Ryan Cahill, who now resides in the great Hobbit town of New Zealand, right?
I think the New Zealanders will probably be a little bit offended if you call New Zealand a town, but you know, this is where we are.
I mean, like the city I live in is bigger than New Zealand, so you know.
That is also fair. I was actually talking to a few Americans who were over here yesterday, and they were talking about trying to get to the coastline from where they're from in Colorado, and it blew my mind because you can travel from the north, from the very northmost tip of Ireland to the southernmost tip in a few hours.
Yeah, it's kind of like that with Texas. And he's not Irish at all, but he's also from the southern U.S. like I am. Christopher Ruocchio, author of Sun Eater. You've been here a billion times. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me back.
Always, always. So the topic today, guys, is novellas. You guys, all three of you are quite well known. I don't feel like Sean is quite well known for writing novellas yet, but I feel like Christopher and Ryan both put out a novella as fast as they put out a novel. Pretty much it's like, hey, I got 5 minutes. Let me write a novella. That's how you guys are. But Shauna, if you guys don't know, she is the author of ℙ𝕬𝕬𝕣𝕬𝕬 Song. This is the first book I have here is Children of Gods and Fighting Men. And I believe Dreams of Fire is going to be a prequel novella. Yes, it's coming out here very, very soon.
Yep, it's coming out on the 14th of March. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very much inspired by Ryan when it came to giving a novella a go. And actually, now I've completely fell in love with the medium. I love novellas.
As a reader, I'm quite fond of them as well. I mean, you talk about Ryan's novellas. Now, this guy's got a problem because, I mean, every time he sneezes, like I say, he's got a new novella coming out. But they're really great because I notice that they keep getting longer and longer. So I feel like pretty soon it's going to be like Harry Potter-sized novels are going to be considered novellas with you guys, right?
Well, I'm not going to lie. The ice is only about 25K off the first Harry Potter book.
It's about right. It's about right. Now, guys, this is child's play because Christopher's his novella.
Well,
now, these have the short stories in them as well. So
I was about to say those are padded out a little bit.
So you did Lesser Devil really early, Queen of Mid-Ashes, and you just recent released Dregs of Empire, which has a very, very sweet dedication at the beginning of it. I'm just going to leave it there. But what I admire about you guys' work here is that you guys all write really fast, and that is really, really impressive when I consider. Your series is going to be done, Shauna, here. I think you're going to do 2002 through 2004. You're going to be done, right? It's just a trilogy?
It's a trilogy, although I've just signed a deal with ℙ𝕦𝕬𝕤𝕬, my publisher, to write 3 more books.
Right. Awesome. Congratulations. And then Bound and Broken, Ryan, you started in 2020, and you're already like ridiculously fast-paced. You got 3 books.
2021, actually.
At this point. And then, Christopher, you started in 2018. You got 6 novels, 3 novellas, 3 short story collections, and books, I guess book 6 is actually about to come out here in about 2, 3, 6 weeks. I don't know. I've lost track of what time. But anyway, you guys write.
Yeah, April 2. Comes out April 2.
How do you guys find time to write novellas? This is amazing.
I quit my job and probably.
Do you want to like? You go first. No, you go. No, whoever wants to go. Go ahead.
You go, Christopher. You're more experienced at writing novellas than me.
Oh, I was just saying, just between writing the books, right? I started doing them because I was before book 1 was out. I'd written books 1 and 2, and I was afraid to get too far ahead, or my editor would start changing things and have more work to do changing things. So I wrote The Lesser Devil because I was 2 books ahead. This was in like 2018 was like right before the first one came out. I was like, man, I should do something because I'm just sitting around doing nothing. So I thought I'd go ahead and do a novella. No.
Go, Philip.
Oh, I felt yes.
Anybody else have anything about novellas, or are we done? We go.
All right, thanks. All right, bye, everybody.
It got silent because Philip, you put Philip's comment up, and I was like, Good job, Philip. And then
I'm sure Philip's writing a novella right now. Yeah, I'm sure he is.
But I'm basically the same with the novellas. It's mostly just in between the books. So like I'll go and I write my book. I write like the first book and it goes off to beta readers and it's going to my line editor. And while I'm twiddling my thumbs, I need to write something. So I write novellas.
Do you ever feel like okay, this is like a storyline that I kind of wanted to put into the book and it didn't quite make it, but I've got enough for novella, or is this just something that just kind of comes up on the fly?
Yeah, and that's spiraled as well. So like for instance, the fall originally when I wrote the first book was actually the prologue for Blood and Fire. So the first section of the fall,
96-page prologue, guys. Yeah. How
it was just part one, and then I went, hold on, this is a bigger story. So I pulled it out completely. I wrote a prologue that fit it better, and then I turned that into a novella. And I tried to, like at the ends of the books, I tried to lead the readers into certain questions. So, we have book 2 and we have ℓ𝕤𝕤𝕣𝕠𝕜𝕤 gets introduced. And then I'm going to go, okay, well now there's questions for ℓ𝕤𝕤𝕠𝕜𝕤, so I want to write a novella about him. And then I do the same with Of War and Ruin and The Ice. And I think it's a good way to lead people into the novellas, make them kind of be interested to read them.
Sure. Christopher, you ever feel like you have leftover stuff and then you say, I'm going to write a novella, or do you plan to?
It's sort of now it's sort of more planned because I take these giant gaps between the books, right? But the first one, I just had this idea that it would be fun to go back and look at Hadrian's brother's point of view, because the books are all written in first person, right? So they're very subjective and they're very much inside Hadrian's head, and so being able to get outside of it and sort of argue with his perspective was kind of fun. And so I've done that a lot with like the short stories too. It's just sort of try to confuse my readers with regards to what actually happened and canon, because it turns out reading history is kind of like that. And I thought it'd be fun. But now I sort of leave these gaps kind of deliberately and think it would be nice to go back and do this thing eventually. So I have like a long list of things I will hopefully get to revisit in novella form at some point in the future.
Yeah, I just learned the other day that apparently there's readers out there who don't read the prologues. So
we're not even going to get into that.
I'm glad that you guys didn't write these as a prologue. You decided to give them some space.
I just kind of the world is such a weird place, because I see people then are like retweeting and commenting and they're saying, I think readers should be able to read whatever way they want, and it's ridiculous. I'm like, we all agree. That's the caveat. Of course, readers should be able to read whatever way they want.
But left and right, the worst makes a sentence. It should still be the way you do it.
Yeah, as like in general, I would say you probably should read from page 1 upwards in numerical order. Yeah, that was usually how the book's meant to be read. But
we're going to do even pages only. So, Shauna, did you plan to write this prequel novella? Or is this something that kind of was requested, or did you just think it was a good idea, or how'd that come about?
I wrote this novella because Ryan told me to.
Not quite.
No, it was like once I started to write the novella, it did come quite easily, because when I wrote The Children of Gods and Fighting Men, I did have to think really hard about how much Irish mythology to include. And I did power back because I wanted it to be readable to people who knew nothing about Irish mythology. And so when you power back, then obviously there's lots of content that you have in your head that you haven't been able to put onto the page yet. And I think with the novella formats, because it's shorter, I think readers are more forgiving with you kind of going off in your tangent and having kind of fun with kind of world building that you couldn't put into the main novel. But I did start to write it because Ryan told me to.
Is your new book series going to be in the same universe?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
great.
It's set about 150 years later. So there is a bit of a time gap, but it's the same universe and some of the same characters.
All right. Well, see, as a reader, I like novellas because how cool I can do the next one. It doesn't feel like it's going to take like a month of my life. That's really, really nice. Yeah. But I will admit, because I'm sure you guys get this a lot. Do I have to read the novellas? I'm sure you get that question a lot. Do I have to for the story to make sense? I feel like when I read The Expanse, and I felt like if I didn't read those short stories, wouldn't have changed the story really for me at all. But all the time they would mention stuff. Hey, I know exactly what they're talking about. So I feel like when they're used to flesh out the world, personally, I love that. I think it's a great, great kind of compliment to a pretty thick story. And when you guys are all writing very, very thick books, it's like, hey, sure, yeah, I'll take a little bit more history lessons on the side. So I'm glad you guys do it.
It's a difficult one though, because I know, like, I have the ice now that's done, and the way I like to say it to people is that, look, you can understand the story without them, but honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. They're written to enhance the story and to weave into the story for my series. But it is a tough one because the stuff that I want to do in book 4, and there's going to be a lot of references and people and characters coming from the novellas, and coming from the most recent novella. And if you haven't read them, it's not going to have as much of an impact for you. So, like, it's a strange line to thread depending on how and why you write the novellas.
Yeah, I kind of try to do sort of the opposite thing. I try to have the novellas be branches out as opposed to branches back in. Just because my sense had always been that I traditionally publish, so I can only get a book out like maybe once a year, just because of the publisher schedule and things like that. But I need to do something to keep people entertained in the meantime, because like competing with whether that's faster indie writers putting something out every quarter, or YouTube putting out a video every nanosecond or whatever, right? Like, I need to do something to remind people I exist, and the novellas have been a convenient way to do that, because I can write a lot faster than my editors can edit and get the books out. So this way I can at least keep people entertained, but I also I don't want I don't want people to feel like they have to go do that, because you have like more casual fans, right? You have people who don't want to do all that. So I think of the novellas as like sort of rewards for people who really care. At least that's been sort of my strategy so far.
Well, whenever I visit your live streams, Christopher, everybody wants you to write a novella about every single side character that's ever showed up in the series. So I guess you won't be running out of options anytime soon.
Right. And like, there eventually, like, I'll have to go do like another thing, guys. So like,
yeah, I'm still waiting for my Tor Gibson backstory. I want to see that. So let's get it. Let's get on that. Come on.
It's on the list eventually, and then people want like sequels to the ones that already exist, and it's
they want sequels to the novellas. All right.
Yeah. I got a real Ender Shadow problem going on over here, but yeah, no. So I don't know. I always thought about them as sort of supplemental, at least insofar as they relate to this particular project. Not all novellas have to be.
So Ryan, you skipped it once.
That's some of the choices you have to make.
Are you planning to do book novella the rest of the way, Ryan?
Yeah, that's the plan. That's how it's gone, and it's also from a very similar reason to Christopher. Like, I released them so there's something going on in between the major releases. So I have A War and Ruin was released in January 2023, and so now this has been the longest it's ever been between the major books in the series. But then I had The Ice come out in September, so it kind of branches that in, and then we had the short story came out in December, and then I should have another short story that hasn't been announced yet coming out later this year. And it's I think trying to keep readers engaged and not fading into obscurity is probably one of the biggest fears of all authors, and I think novellas are really good for that. It does constantly remind people that you're there. It reminds them that you're working. It reminds them that you're producing, that your world is there. There's so many great things to do with them.
Yeah, you can't all be like Christopher, and he writes faster than his editor can edit them. So, machine.
That is pretty insane.
Yeah.
Well, my editor historically was quite slow, which is like a whole other video.
He's with a different publisher now. I'll say the quiet part out loud for you.
That was part of it. Yes. Daw has done a lot to sort of smooth things over, but there were some difficulties, that's for sure.
Don't worry.
Let's not put Christopher on the spot too heavy here, guys.
Question: is it more enjoyable as an author to write a novella or a 1,000+ pager?
Oh,
it's very different, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's a weird one now. Even while I'm writing A Vampires in Dust, and I know it's going to be about the same length as A War and Ruin. So about 1,000 pages is when you squeeze the font down. It's going to be about 400,000 words. So it would be a bit above that. And the problem is I keep watching other people writing shorter books, releasing more frequently. And so, like, it is an amazing feeling when you finish the book and people read it, and if they love it, it's incredible. But also you get less of those feelings, because one person is after getting the feeling of finishing a book 3 times in the space of time it's taken me to finish one. So that satisfaction of finishing a story, and I'm watching loads of other authors finishing their trilogies, and I'm just like, oh man, if I had written shorter books, I'd finished a few trilogies by now.
Right.
Yeah, I have that same thought frequently. I think I like the overall experience of writing one of the novellas better because exactly that, the cycle is a lot shorter. Yeah. We were talking about this right before we got on, right? Like Ryan's books are longer than mine, and mine are pretty long. By about like day 300 of working on a book, I'm like really ready to be done with it.
Oh, the next one.
And so when we don't even get there because it's like a 50-day project or something, like that's way better. Sort of.
And there's that point in the middle of these big books where I don't know if you feel it, but I definitely question as to whether the hell I have any idea what I'm doing. Right around halfway through, I'm like, this is shit. This is abysmally shit. And then it takes me a little bit to get out of that rut, and then I get back to do the editing pass, and I'm like, not as bad as I initially felt it was, but still needs an edit.
Yeah, every time, right? And then you invariably run into like a part that's just really, really complicated. Even if it's not in the middle, it could be at the end or wherever, right? There's one chapter in this last book I spent like 2 months on. It was just a nightmare. And I had to like abandon it and come back a few times because I just couldn't handle it anymore.
I'm not one of those people. There's some people I know who, and it's really funny because I've never deleted a chapter ever. I have reworked the chapters, but it's because if I usually spend so long, I take longer to write the same amount of words because I could write 2,000 words in a day, but it won't take me 4 hours. It will take me 10 because I will sit there and I'll go over it and over it and over it. And the advantage is I tend not to run down corridors in the wrong direction and have to rework back another 50,000 words. I know people who throw out like 100,000 words because they just wrote in the wrong direction. And I don't do that, thankfully. But the problem with that is I could get to a complicated part, like Christopher was saying, and I'll just sit there for days. And I'm just like, I don't know how to get this to work the way I want it to work, and it also be satisfying. And it can be so frustrating.
That's why I went to War and Ruin, like, oh no, because I asked him beforehand, I was like, do you do any edits after? He's like, not really. And so when I got to War and Ruin, I was like, I have a feeling this book shouldn't be 400,000 words. And I was like, son of a bitch, he's right. There's not what I
do. There's a lot of, so when I do, I have 20 beta readers, and so I'll edit after I do it, and it goes to 20 beta readers, then I edit again, then it goes to my line editor, and then I'll edit again, and then it goes to my proofreader. But I think the difference is it gets quite a lot of editing, but the end book is not that dissimilar to the initial book that went in. It's just tightened, emotions are kind of made more poignant in where they need to be and cut out where they need to be, and it's more about pruning. And I think the only reason, like, I write quite a clean first draft from an overarching story perspective, just because, like I said, I know some people who write 2,000 words and they'll have done it in 3 hours. And I can't do that. I'm not able to. I will sit there and it could be 2 a.m. like every night, and all I'm getting is 2,000 words. But they're usually reasonably solid. They just might read like a child wrote them, potentially, and I'll clean that up.
Shauna, do you prefer the big old chonkers or write novellas? And also you got a question asking about the second novella.
The second novella.
If you can say.
Well, I'll answer your question first. So I find, because a novella will be like a simpler story. So Dreams of Fire, I wrote that in 3 weeks, just because it is complex, but you're not weaving so many story strands in with each other. Whereas my third book in the series, which is 170,000 words, I mean, it really did take me a whole year to write that, and I found it incredibly complicated as well, because it's the final book in that era. You're trying to tie up lots of strands that have been running for 3 books. So I found the novellas a real welcome relief after that, because it just felt like much simpler, and it's just one character and one little short story to do with that character. So the first novella is from the perspective of Ronit, who's one of the main character's sister. And my second novella is from the perspective of Senna, who is a crow.
Okay. And Shauna, do you narrate your own audiobooks? Because I'll actually try to make an effort to listen if that's the case.
No.
Well, I can't listen to audiobooks.
She doesn't, but Aoife, who does narrate them, is fantastic.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a lot of like,
she is Irish.
But what's amazing about it though is we use a lot of the Irish names and Irish culture and Irish history, and for a non-Irish reader, it might be a little bit hard to imagine the pronunciation. I suppose in the same way, if I have weird fantasy names, that people have to try and imagine how to pronounce them. But because you have Aoife, and Aoife's so good, it's just flawless when you're listening to it. Like it's brilliant. I really, really enjoyed the audiobook.
I think my wife's we started watching television shows with subtitles when the kids were born because they're loud. You know, and got like so addicted to it now. Like she doesn't like to go. We're going to see Dune on Sunday, and she's already like upset that there won't be subtitles. And I'm like, they don't subtitle movies at the theater. No, not English movies. They don't do that. But I'm saying, like, when I would try to listen to an audiobook, I have no idea. Just knowing some of the names that you guys have put in your series and the names of like cities and planets, and I'm like, someone would be like talking about some character. I'd be like, who are you talking about? Because I would have no idea how it was actually spelled or anything like that. So that would drive me absolutely batty. So I don't know how you guys do the audio thing. Ryan, I know you love this question. Should they read The Fall before they read The Fun?
It's so funny when all this before, have you? I think Christopher's like quite clearly confused. When all this came about, basically there's a reading order debate.
It was breaking up really bad. So.
Oh, but yeah, there's a reading order debate between whether you read the first novella or the first book, and I just try and stay the hell out of it because I wrote the first novella so that it could be read in either order. You can read it beforehand or afterwards, and it just kind of changes the impacts of certain things, and you find things out in a different order. And I'm never going to answer the question because I will lose half my readership if I do. So
I feel like if you've read like Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson or Eye of the World, I feel like if you're okay with that kind of prologue where you're like, I don't get any answers to anything, then yeah, I tell people if you can handle that kind of opening, yeah, definitely start with The Fall, because I feel like it sets the stage for what the series does become, whereas it might feel a little small, kind of small scale and gets larger as it goes along. So I tell people,
I remember
an idea of what the series is like. Yeah, do The Fall first.
The first time I read the Eye of the World prologue, I just read it and I sat there for a few minutes and I was like,
what
the fuck just happened?
Like as far as I ever got.
Sanderson has like prologue, prologue, but at least they're like, the way Sanderson writes his prose is usually quite clear, and you know what's happening, you just don't know why it relates to everything else. Whereas at least in Eye of the World, I was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know if he's insane. I don't know what the fuck's going on, and it's all crazy. But I still love Wheel of Time.
Yeah, I know you got 3 friends in your series. Watch out, Shauna. What part of Irish history do your books deal with?
Okay, so the history that I use in my series is from about 981 to 1014 in the first trilogy, which is a very, like in Irish history, is a very exciting time period. But a long time ago, so not very many people.
A long time ago in a galaxy pretty close to England.
Yeah.
So did any of you start off thinking you would write a novella at some point, or did it just happen? Like your first one?
It was never like part of my. I never thought I was going to write a short story, and I've written like 30 of them. So it shows how good I am at predicting these things. I just thought it would be novels, but then I got so far ahead. I was like, I need to do something, and sort of strategically, it makes more sense to write a novella than it does to write a bunch of short stories, because you can make more of an event out of it and sell more of them than you can just an individual short story, especially if you don't have anywhere to put the short story, like in a magazine or something.
Stories are very hard to sell on their own.
Yeah. I mean, that used to not be the case, but like just the like 100 years ago. But the reading habits of people have changed so far that just like the short story is not what it used to be, right? People don't read pulp magazines, so the novella made sort of sense as a compromise. And the nice thing about doing the novellas too, at least for me, is my publisher wasn't interested in them, so my writing them was sort of a non-compete thing, and my agent didn't represent them. She only represents my novels, so I could just do whatever I wanted. And so I've been, like a quarter an indie writer and like 3/4 a traditionally published writer, and I've been able to do sort of both, which has been nice, because traditional publishing will only pay you twice a year, and getting paid every month is substantially nicer. So
that was the one thing that I'm always, whenever we have talks about like traditional and independent publishing, I always hate when it's always like the two against each other, or like one or the other. There's so many different things to each of them. But one that I always found very funny was someone said to me before, they're like, "Oh yeah, but traditional publishing, at least it's more regular payment." I was like, "Are you on crack?"
Yeah, right.
I get paid every month.
Anything about it without telling you anything about it.
You don't get more regularly paid than monthly in writing.
No, I learned that when I talked to Michael J. Sullivan, because he was actually on Orbit, and he went on his own, and he pretty much crowdfunds every single book that he makes now. And I actually asked him when I interviewed him, I was like, did it take a lot of courage to walk away from that steady paycheck? And he's like, I make way more money now than I ever did with Orbit.
But it's also more reliable. Like, okay, you have to use the caveat, because I'll always get attacked if I say it's more reliable. Then someone else will come on and say, well, I don't earn any money in independent publishing. I was like, oh, that's not what I mean. It's more reliable once it is a career, and once you are earning it as a career. It's more reliable in the fact that your royalties are 3 months in arrears. So I now know that I'm going to get income this month, next month, and the month after. For sure, every month, and I know exactly what I'm getting on each of those months. And as it goes on, you can add another month to that. So I always know 3 months ahead what I'm going to get paid, and that it's every month. And that's pretty reliable to me. That's like as reliable as a job any job I've had before. I don't know. Just thinking there, Christopher, if you've tried, one thing that I'm going to try at some stage is the short stories, publishing them on Patreon, because a lot of people are willing to pay like $1. And they get a free short story every month or whatever it is. And one of the things that I want to do is write some short stories, put them on Patreon. People can pay $1. That's all they need to pay.
Or at least give like an exclusive window. It might be released later, but you get access to it first. Yeah.
So that's that, and I'll do some other stuff to make it, feasible. But then also at the end of the year, take all of those short stories and put them in a Kickstarter for a hardback. And then anyone who's on the Patreon can get like a discount or get whichever it is.
Like, for example, Christopher, you sent me that little secret project the other day. I'm about halfway through it, by the way.
Cool.
You should put that on a Patreon. I think that'd be a great idea.
It'll probably show up in the next couple of months. I do this a little bit, but less formally. Once a month, I put up either a short story or a draft of something that's either in process or that isn't going to see the light of day. I've had a hard time getting people to like notice that I'm doing it. I keep posting about it, but like it hasn't like caught on. For whatever reason, but I've been plugging away at it. That secret project will probably show up in the summer.
Super secret, you guys. Super secret.
How secret is super secret?
In fact, we shouldn't be talking about it.
We probably gone too far.
So super duper secret.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it though.
Hey Ryan, this is off topic. What's this dude talking about? You wrote a story about plushies, and I remember about you got like Mama's Wooden Spoon. I know that story, but I don't know anything about plushies.
No, but just they want to get little teddies, little plushy toys made of the dragons and stuff. And it's something I want to look into with my merchandise partners, but it takes a while. But they like to keep bringing it up.
Pop. They'll make a Funko Pop of anything.
You want a squeezy furry dragon,
Oh, Shauna, that was what I was going to say, but I didn't want to get like the year wrong and sound like a complete moron. So that's Viking Ranger. They're Vikings in your books. Is she locked up?
I think
she's frozen, but there are Vikings in her books.
No.
Oh, she's kind of back. I think she just blew a kiss. I saw her do this.
Go like this. All right. Well, there are Vikings in her book. We'll come back.
Oh, Shauna's back. You're muted, though, Shauna.
Am I back?
You are back.
There we go.
Go ahead.
I think. Sorry, somebody's asked. That's so there are Vikings in my book. So the period of history in Ireland at that time, the Vikings have already invaded Ireland, and they've already made settlements in Ireland. So Dublin, Wexford, Waterford would be the most famous ports at that time. So it's not so much about Viking invasion, but it's about kind of the conflict that can arise, I suppose, when you have a new group of people come in, and how they also then get used sometimes by the Irish kings.
Yeah, my ancestors are actually from Wexford, so that's really, really cool. They would be around that time, but they left in 1849. Gold rushers out here came out to San Francisco.
No,
So
no,
That's
that's
famine time.
actually that's more the famine time than the gold rush. They left because they weren't getting fed.
Yeah. So I mean, that's something I've always been interested. That's like one of those things we said that'll be a bucket list, like after the kids are gone, kind of thing. We can afford a trip like that. But yeah, that's definitely something that I would love to do. Someone asked a really good question. I'm looking for it, but they asked, what are some of you guys' favorite novellas that you've ever read?
Oh, my favorite is The Mountains of Mourning by Lois Bujold. It's one of her Vorkosigan stories. It's a lot smaller. Like it's not it's a space opera series, but there's no space in it. It's like very confined to the main character adjudicating a like legal case in a mountain village in his like fiefdom back on his planet. It's practically a fantasy story, but it's very human. Like it's very just into sort of this like small little tragedy that happens in this little mountain.
When I talked to Jim Butcher, he was really, really high on that series for Coast.
It's so good. Lois is I've said this before. Lois is like one of the best character writers in science fiction history. Really? Like just no contest. It's just an absolute genius. But that novella is great.
Well, I was introduced to novellas and short stories through Stephen King, so it would probably be The Body, Stephen King in different seasons novella. That's easy answer for me, and no one here reads Stephen King besides me, but there we go. You guys have any particular novellas? I mean, because I always want to go to like Lovecraft or Robert E. Howard, but I was like, I guess those really are considered short stories, not novellas, aren't they? Because they're all like less than 30 pages.
I'm sure Lovecraft and Howard have things that are technically novellas.
I guess The Mountains of Madness was kind of considered a novella, right?
Yeah, that for sure. Some of the longer, maybe like Black Colossus might be a novella. Of course, there's only the one Conan novel, right? Hour of the Dragon. I'd have to like look at word counts to tell you definitively. But
and that's where I get into the argument of like, is it a short story or a novella or a novel? Is it page count, word count? What's the actual argument?
I can
word counts.
Yeah. It's word count in science fiction. At least it's the distinction set by the Hugo Award, and it's like a 100-year-old distinction too at this point because like novels are substantially longer than they used to be.
Both of you and Ryan both being like, "What's the word count limit?" I'm gonna get one word under that.
I'm over. I'm firmly over for 2 of the 3 novellas.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's 40,000 words, and longer is a novel by Hugo standards. And like nowadays, publishers won't buy a novel if it's shorter than 80,000 words. Traditional publishers won't buy a novel if it's shorter than twice what the Hugo Award parameters say. So they really should like update those, but they have bigger problems at the moment. So
Ryan, Shauna, sorry, did you guys have a favorite novella?
I actually, it's like my dirty secret. I've actually never read a novella.
Not even your own? This is just your way to answer your own story, huh?
Only my own. It was just a case of it just kind of happened and I wanted to write them and I don't know, with short stories, I'm trying to do a lot more research because I feel like novella writing versus novel writing is very similar in that you have enough space to have plot, whereas short stories don't actually need plot, and that's not too contentious. I think like Ken Liu and a lot of other people who write short stories, they would say that too. You can have plot, but a lot of the time it doesn't need like intricate plot. It can be a short story of 2 characters just having a themed conversation. So short story feels like a totally different art form, whereas novellas, I think they can be a different art form, but it's very similar practice to a longer story, just taken down. It's almost like a side quest sometimes.
Cypress in the Exile was freaking awesome. That was what made me become full on House of Terry. So
I really liked writing the Exile. That was fun. That was really fun.
Shauna, you have a favorite?
I really like. There's a series. I think her name is Nevo. The first book in her series is The Empress of Salt and Fortune. I think she's got 5 novellas. It's like a novella series. And I read the first 3, but they're brilliant. And they also kind of got me into the way of reading novellas. And I myself, like you said, you appreciate reading a very complete and intricate story, but it's a short, it's a short story, if you see what I mean. Like you could read it in a day easily. But it had like more complexity, I suppose, than a short story. So her novellas are brilliant.
And someone's asking here that they read that Gormflaith is based on a real queen. Is Folda based on him? Because I'm new to historical fiction, but I love this idea. So are you basing these characters on anyone like real people?
Yeah, so like over half of the characters are based on real people from Irish history. So Gormla is an Irish queen, so she existed in real life, but I've just given her Fomorian powers, which is fire magic in Irish mythology. But Fola, so anyone who is in the ℕ𝕤𝕤𝕒𝕤𝕤, they are made up. They're not from history. So they're just my own invention.
Christopher, has the experience of fatherhood found its way into your writing? Guys, you got to know what book 6 is about, right?
Yeah, well, actually, I wrote book 6. Mostly, I started book 6 before I knew we were having our daughter. I gave Hadrian a daughter first, actually. Cassandra predates my own daughter. But I did have to edit the book after she was born a bit, and so there's one chapter in particular in there that's written after my daughter was born that I think is probably like obvious which chapter it is. You like read the book. And so moving forward, yes. But most of book 6 was pre being a father. But yeah, I mean, I expect, that particular life change will influence everything from now on. So
it will. Heidi, what I loved about Willful Princess is it was so nice to read a Robin Hobb story that wasn't 1,000 freaking pages. It was really, really nice. I really, really appreciate it. It's like, wow, she's just like getting to the point really, really quick. This is awesome. I love Rumble the Eldlings. Don't get me wrong, but Robin does take the long way around the block. Let's put it that way. She's gonna, when everybody else is just taking the straight path, she's gonna go around to the woods. And anyway, there we go. Yeah, here's somebody else like that. That's a great name, Empress of Salt and Fortune. I like that quite a bit.
It's really good. It's a really clever novella. I really enjoyed that. I'm
reading Shogun right now. I think, Christopher, you said you read it back in college, right? That's just,
yeah, it's been, I need to reread it though.
That's awesome. That's an awesome read. I mean, I'm splitting it up over 3 months because it's so massive, but I'm having a great time with it. But that's got a lot of people that were based on real characters, real historical figures. So I think that's a really neat idea, especially when you can like mix and match and kind of combine some people and different timelines, people who didn't live together at the same time. Like, Christopher, I don't know if you watched Vikings when it was on History Channel, but it was like, I mean, I understand what they're doing right now, but these characters weren't both alive at the same time, but it's still really cool to see them together, things like that. So I feel like with historical fiction, sometimes that's why.
That's why I like Guy Case so much, because he just sort of takes an episode from history and he'll move it to a fantasy world and change all the names, but like, oh, that's Alfred the Great, man. Like you can't hide that from me. But then he can change, he changes things around and, gives history maybe not necessarily a better ending, but a more interesting one sometimes, and or a more satisfying one, depending on your perspective. But I think that stuff's really fun.
Yeah, the thing I keep getting this comment, I did a review recently of Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett, and as I think that's my favorite. If you're making me pick a favorite historical fiction book ever, that would be it. And so, I mean, I haven't done a lot of reviews of historical fiction on my channel, so I'm getting a whole new audience because I think apparently it got picked up by Google's algorithm or something, because like the view count was like really high. So a lot of people's first experience, and so many comments how you can't really call this historical fiction because it's not accurate at all. And I'm like, that's why it's called historical fiction, not a history book, right? I mean, I think so at least, but it's been quite an experience getting to know a lot of nice new viewers.
We should rebrand it to historical make-believe.
Historical make-believe.
Nice and clear. Nice and clear.
Well, you see, it's saying that my series is historical fantasy, because it is historical fiction, but I've just added like people with magical powers into it. Yeah. But to me, when I read it, it really reads more like historical fiction sometimes. But then I think when any historical fiction that you read, it is mostly fantastical because you don't know what happened. You don't know how people felt or the real reasons why people did things. So there's always an element of fantasy when you go back in time.
Yeah, well, it all jumps back into mythology, and like all Irish history, Irish mythology, all Greek mythology, it's all interlaced with magic and gods and stuff that's supernatural, and that's just part of it.
Yeah, I have so many people asking me, I don't really read historical fiction, but I like Pillars of the Earth. Like it's just a fantasy book, but without dragons or magic in it, guys. I mean, it's that's all you'd have to add, and it would be a fantasy book. Huh?
The Last Kingdom is like I'm just reading Avra's comment that The Last Kingdom is probably it's a series that I love and hate at the same time, because I love it, but whatever way he just kept writing it, he needed to write the next book. He always needed to make ℙ𝕦𝕣𝕠𝕜𝕤 make a really fucking out of character stupid decision at the end of the book so he could write the next book. And it was so frustrating because I love the book and I love this TV series and I'm watching it and I love it. And it gets to the end and then ℙ𝕦𝕤𝕠𝕜 just becomes someone else for like 100 pages. And you're like,
I was
why
saying
is
when I
this
was watching
happening?
the show, I'd be like, why is ℙ𝕦𝕤𝕠𝕜𝕠𝕜 making this decision? People are like, oh, don't worry, he does that in the books too.
You know why he's making the decision? Because it's the easiest way to write another book.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
I've only read Cornwell's Warlord Chronicles. Loved it. As someone I grew up loving the Arthurian legend, so that was just like an awesome series. So I definitely wanted to read more of him, and I figured Last Kingdom would probably I'd do that before, maybe the Grail Quest before I did anything like Sharp or something like that, which is just so long. But yeah, Cornwell's great.
The Last Kingdom is brilliant. I started to read it quite early on when they were being released, and so see when people are reading it now and they complain about ℙ𝕦𝕠𝕜𝕤 making silly mistakes. I love that because it'd been 2 years since he'd last made a silly mistake, and it would immediately throw you back into like his world and like what was going on. Whereas I think maybe people who are reading it now and then binge reading, they kind of that irritates them more. But for me, I loved it.
I think for me it was more the fact that he would make a very ℙ𝕦𝕠𝕜𝕤 has a point in the series of being he's a very smart, strong warrior. Like he knows what he's doing. He's a battlefield legend. And then he just makes him stupid for 100 pages. And that gets me because you've just flipped your whole character development, like just to suit the narrative. And it really annoyed me when I'm reading it. Like what he does in the last 100 pages in most of the books goes completely against his core character function for all the rest of the book. He's like, driving for family. I got to get free and protect my family. Oh, I'm going to have to pledge to the king again and protect my family once more. What? What? There's no outside pressures forcing you to do this. You're making a clear choice of your own volition. Stop it.
Chris, we feel like this is you're the GGK guy. Do you feel like this is a fair comparison, Shogun?
Yeah. I mean, look, you haven't read any Nikkei, right?
Never.
I think if you like Clavel, I think that you would like maybe like Under Heaven or something. Those are his like fantasy China books. My favorite is Sailing to Sarantium because I'm a big Byzantine Empire weeb. But you can't really go wrong. I love everything of his I've ever read. Yeah, you should add that to the list one day. I know I keep giving you homework, and someone mentioned Tim Powers. So
I was about to say, is this your burner account? Are you doing this like over the side?
No, that's George. He's probably teeing me up here, but I didn't pay him to do that. But yeah, no, Tim Powers is my favorite historical fantasy writer.
I'm assuming he means like American Westerns. Do you consider Westerns historical fiction?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Sure, they're based off real character. So, hey, I got a fun question for everybody here involved. Okay, so Shauna, you write historical fantasy. Ryan, you write fantasy. Christopher, you write science fiction. What genre would you guys like to write outside of that? If you ever decide to write like a new series and you didn't want to stick with the same genre, which one would you most like to go to?
I think one of my most natural that I've always wanted, like space opera, sci-fi is something I've always loved because it's fantasy in space a lot of the time. So it's very similar to what I write. I could never write hard sci-fi like The Expanse because I just don't want to do that research and be wrong.
Go do your homework.
And have people like destroy me for it. Whereas I love space opera fantasy, always have. And actually, like Christopher's is the next book I have on the table to read. I have Empire Silence down here. And I've been waiting to read them. And I keep getting, every time I post stuff on like Instagram and stuff, it's like, you got to read the Sun Eater. You got to read the Sun Eater. And I'm like, I'm getting there, but I'm so slow at reading right now. Because of writing that it's painstaking. Like I'm currently reading, I don't read multiple books at a time. I didn't used to, but now I just am. And I have Words of Radiance inside that I'm about through 1/4 of the way through. And I'm also maybe about 20% through Gardens of the Moon. and they're just going so slow. I'm just trying to read them.
You're
My
reading.
brother, you can't mix anything. You can't even like have a life while you're reading Malazan. I'm sorry, you just can't.
See, the way I look at it though, and this is the thing, I probably get hate for this opinion, but like, I don't think Gardens of the Moon is complicated written. I think its intricacies aren't written very well in the idea of I'm actually really liking the book, but he doesn't like leave the breadcrumbs for you to understand if you gave it your full attention. They're not there. You can't understand it. He's going to give me those breadcrumbs in book 3, from what I've heard. But like, I got like 80 pages of essentially a tarot deck, and there's no explanation. And it's not as though if I gave it my full attention and sat there with a notepad that I'd be able to work stuff out. I literally don't have the information provided to me. So I'm like, I'm going to read it. I'll get to book 3 and I'll do what everyone says. And if I'm hooked by then, I don't feel like I should have to get to book 3 to be hooked. But if I'm hooked by then, I'll keep reading.
You can be like Christopher and just not read at all while you're writing, which I respect, and I understand why you do it.
Yeah, well, I don't read fiction when I'm writing, unless I like have a professional obligation, like someone wants me to do a blurb or something. I'll co-sign everything you said about Gardens of the Moon, though. I couldn't finish it.
Yeah.
So genre bending, where would you go next if you were you're gonna write different? I think I know, but you know where.
Oh yeah, I'll just reverse Ryan's answer. I'll go to epic fantasy for the same reasons. Yeah. I mean, that's.
I've talked to so many sci-fi writers that said they want to write fantasy because they're jealous that they get to have nice maps. Star charts just aren't as sexy as maps.
That's true.
That is a thing.
Dawn wasn't willing to pay for a star chart at the beginning of the series. I have one now, but they were like, "Yeah, it's science fiction. Nobody cares," which is like not exactly right, but is sort of illustrative of the point.
So I think that Shauna wants to write romance next, right?
No? I am actually writing a romantasy at the minute. I know. Well, I'm doing my own spin.
No. I'm going to stop you there, Shauna. Don't be embarrassed because I know you're not actually embarrassed. You're really liking doing this, and that's good.
Oh, I am. Yeah, but it's what I would say is epic romantasy. If that is not
lots of sex as opposed to small quantities.
What you're saying is it's actually just going to be fantasy with some romance in it, not smut fantasy.
Exactly that.
Oh, yes. I thought you said you were writing smutty fantasy.
No, I'm not.
No, if you had the word epic, then that means you can write your explicit sex scene in it. But if you start talking about like these two dragons fighting at the same time, it's all good.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not smutty. It's more what I would think is sort of like Game of Thrones, but a bit more romance in it, if that makes sense.
You know, what's funny is I thought my wife, she likes to read fantasy books. She likes to read smut books. I thought Sarah J. Maas sounds perfect for her. So I bought her the Throne of Glass series, and she was like, I'm not reading that shit. So I don't know. Maybe this will be something I can push in her direction.
It's quite funny because I get a lot of people. They're like, "Oh, what do you feel about Fourth Wing?" And I'm like, I think it's great. Like, as in, I've not read the book. I don't know if the book's any good, but what it's done for fantasy is incredible.
Oh, no doubt. I can see it everywhere.
There's a lot of, but in particular, the female audience is massive for Fourth Wing, and I see a lot of people coming in, and I've gotten comments before, and it's like, yeah, I was reading Fourth Wing, and I wanted more dragons, so I read your books. A lot less sex than I was expecting, but really enjoyed it. Well, I think it's great. It's doing for fantasy now kind of what Twilight did for vampires. Like, and there's a lot of people who saw Twilight and the sparkly vampires and all this sort of stuff, but then they wanted more of similar, and then they dug deeper and they kept getting more. And then you have Jay Kristoff's Empire of the Vampire and how massive that is, and he himself like talks about Twilight and says like he's really thankful for what that book did for the genre in getting people into it and broadening it. But the book itself might not be his cup of tea, but if it gets people into the area you're in.
Now you want to talk about a guy that can write some smut.
Oh yeah.
He's quite good at it too. Let's just put it that way.
He did a lot of research.
Favorite book? I mean, come on the spot, gun to your head. You got one book, guys. What is it? What's it going to be?
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, that's right. You're counting it as one book. Yeah, I get this.
Yeah, it is one book.
I did my top 10 fantasy books, and I put just Fellowship of the Ring on there, and everybody got so mad about it. So
one book. I really don't know.
It's okay not to have a favorite. You can have many favorites. You can.
I
You
do
can
have many favorites.
You can have like
We watched
6
Shauna
best
again,
men
she
your way.
froze up.
No big deal.
I think probably like at least if I'm to like cheat a little bit, like my modern favorite is
Malice, right?
Probably Malice. Yeah. It is up there. It's just hidden. It's like there. It's probably Malice. Just because that series has really got me back into fantasy in general. But I have a lot of long time favorites.
Yeah, I love Malice. You got one, Shauna?
So is this just my favorite book of all time?
I guess so. Sure.
Pressure.
Oh, I can't answer that question. I read a lot, so I
well, the book police aren't going to come get you if you change your mind later. Don't worry about it. It's okay.
I know. Well, if I was, my favorite book's probably not a fantasy book. It would be a historical fiction book called Star of the Sea by Joseph O'Connor. And it's a historical fiction about a famine ship actually coming from Ireland to America. It's really a brilliant book. Obviously, this Lord of the Rings would be one of my favorite books of all time as well. That's the book that really got me into fantasy. My brother gave it to me when I was about 11. And I just
Christopher got mad that you stole his book.
No, it's something with my camera.
All right, we can still hear you. All right, so Philip's always going to. Philip's like that thing, like if you whisper his name or something like that, if you talk about Malazan, Philip's going to be there to tell you why it's amazing. And it is amazing, don't get me wrong, but I can see people just getting into it.
You see, here's the thing for me, and here's the way. So I see Philip's. I know Philip loves Malazan. I'd love to talk to Philip about Malazan, as I have been told. But the thing for me is, I think as an author, like it's easy for me to say that when readers read our series, sometimes there are things that we intended to be there the whole time, and sometimes there are things we fixed later in books that make breadcrumbs in the first books. So, like, you know, I might get to book 3 and go, oh my God, I need to do this, because if you go back, there's a marker in book 1 that would link into this, and people go, oh, you're a genius for linking that together. And I was like, kind of just coincidental, and then I made the most of it in the next book. And I feel like with Guardians of the Moon, there's a lot of that going on where it's really heavy stuff that, like, you read 80 pages and not have a clue what's happening. And then in like book 3, he tries to fix that from book 1, because I can't see, I'm reading some of it going, this is literally just like, it's the first time in my life ever that I've skipped a chapter of a book, because I was reading it and I got like a few pages in and I was like, this has no bearing on anything. And I've read the same page 9 times now and I can't get past it. So I need to move. It's the only time I've ever done it in my life. But I'm still liking the book, so it's weird.
I'm trying to think if I've ever skipped I'm just not that type of reader.
I am.
Ryan, you were the one earlier that said you weren't allowed to skip pages, and now you're skipping whole chapters.
But that's what I mean. No, 100%. And I've never in my life skipped anything in any book at all. But I was reading it and going, as I was reading it, I'm going, this chapter, like, it's just some guy having an introspective conversation with his own brain in half third person. And I'm like, I will put this book down. Either I move to the next chapter or I DNF, because I just can't. My brain wasn't focusing. And I think I have trouble reading at the minute anyway, because I always feel like I should be writing. And so that reading time feels really precious to me. And so I probably give books less of a rope than I normally would, just because if I'm not enjoying it, like I'm missing all the. It was the Croup chapter. It was the Croup chapter. It was the first Croup chapter.
That character. Oh,
I love that you picked that one out, because it was. But yeah, no, I think I'm probably a bit more. I have to be more selective at what I'm reading right now, because otherwise I won't read. And I like reading, like I love reading, so I need to be really selective at what I'm reading. So I think maybe 5 years ago, I probably would have just tanked through it and read the whole book in like a day, or 2 days. But now I can't at all.
That is, you can leave, Josh. That's not true. Stop it. Stop it.
Don't worry. There's not a trigger. We're all welcome to our own opinions. Yours is just wrong.
Like, more people than not tell me, that they like Faithful, but I will find people who say that they feel like it's the same book over and over again.
Oh,
but you get the same people say the Last Kingdom series is amazing, but it's still. But then they say it's formulaic, and they do the same thing. It's like an MCU movie; they do the same thing every single book.
But there's so many things. Even like I think I don't know what it is recently on some of the Facebook groups that I've been a part of for ages because I was a reader long before I was a writer. It's people posting stuff about some of my books, and there's loads of really positive things. And there's always one person who like absolutely. It's never like I didn't really like it. It's always I fucking hated this series, and then lists all the reasons. And then a lot of those reasons are also the reasons why other people like the books. So that just happens. Yeah, Croup does not seem to be the most popular person.
He was my favorite character, so I think I'm reading the series wrong. I loved him.
Dude, when I was first viewing him and I was doing reviews on the channel, people were just like blown away when I said I didn't like him.
Were you on ketamine when you read the book?
He was on it when he wrote them.
I don't know. I think I've got a bit of a weird inner monologue going on all the time, so I completely understood him.
You see, it's a thing for me is that like I love characters who do that, the little bit of the kind of the rambling, like some of the inside part out loud. I actually really love those characters. I was just reading it and I just didn't click. I think Philip Chase is gonna hate me forever for feeling that way, but yeah.
I don't think Philip has it in him to hate anybody.
No, he's a really lovely dude.
I know he's just lovable. Like he's reading One Piece now. We'd had a chat about One Piece yesterday, and that was something I never thought would happen a year ago. Not only me talking about One Piece, but Philip talking with me about One Piece. Like, wow, what's going on? What's going on? Christopher, I'm old enough to remember when you had to convince me to read Berserk. So,
Yeah. And Berserk is better. So, you're in trouble with the Malazan fans, and I'll take the One Piece people. I have disliked it since it was dubbed by 4 kids.
But there is a difference, though. I think the One Piece fans will hate you online. The Malazan fans will find my home.
I didn't have a bad experience with the Malazan fans. I mean,
look, I say this because my brother is like a huge One Piece fan, so I take like every opportunity to remind him that I'm not interested. I have nothing really against it. I just don't like the art style, and I never have. It's the same. Like I have like the most like tepid. Like I'm not interested in Malazan either. Like I can't say anything articulate about it like you did. I just got like 150 pages in, and I'm like, this is so not for me. And like people always say, well, it's because you're not smart enough. Like I read Gene Wolfe for fun, right?
Right.
Like, that's the thing. That's actually the thing. The reason I had that much to say about it, because I'm actually pretty tepid on it too. But it's that's the point when someone says, no, it's not a problem with the book. It's that you're not smart enough to figure it out. And I'm like, no. It's a problem with the book that gets fixed in books 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. But I have problem. My first book is laden with flaws and problems, and so is all my books. Every book has flaws. But yeah, it's that you're not intelligent enough to figure it out. I was like, I'm sorry, my friend. That is not the case.
Yeah, I have like 2 million words to the contrary. Please miss me with this take. I just didn't like your favorite book. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's totally cool. Like, yeah, people are allowed not like things.
The hot takes are getting out of control here. So I feel like this is a great topic to have. What's your biggest book hot take? Come on now. I got one. Name of the Wind is overrated as shit. And I don't even understand why everybody loves that book so much. Christopher's a better writer anyway, so there we go.
But that's one of those as well that I'm on the Christopher tepid train there. I read the first 6 pages of Name of the Wind, and then I put it down to go make some dinner, and I just never went back to it. That was it. No feelings, no anything. Just never went back. Still haven't. That was 5 years ago.
Shauna, hot take. Come on, let your hate flow. Let's give it. Let's hear it. Go for it. Come on.
I'm terrible at hot takes because I don't really have any hot takes. I know. I'll try and think of one.
United Ireland.
I know Christopher's got a few.
The problem with my hot takes is they're like either like very specific or they're so thermonuclear that I like shouldn't say them. But
let's go with combination.
Nuclear.
Yeah.
Specific thermonuclear.
Well, like here's maybe like an interesting one, and I've said this before. Like I think hard magic sucks, and I think people should stop writing it because it has ruined fantasy. Because fantasy novels are not video games, and they are not tabletop games. Please stop writing a novel. Like Lit RPG 1 should not exist. I hate it. And 2, here you go, Mike. You asked for it.
This comes out with the hottest take ever.
It's terrible. It's garbage. It's not literature. It's like a separate hobby. Have your own thing. No, I so dislike it. But hard magic like is like a stepping stone to the process by which literature is destroyed. Because we start writing books like they are not books. We write them like they are D&D campaigns, and then we actually start writing D&D campaigns instead of novels, and those outperform actual novels. And it's just so devastating and sad that we live in this degenerate time where people are like, I would so much rather read somebody playing a tabletop game than anything else. It's just so distressing to me. But there you go.
I love how Christopher is like just chilling, relax. He's in the corner. He's having a nice time. All right, nothing crazy.
Let him cook, Ryan.
Okay, guys, let me roll up these sleeves.
Well, look, you asked, okay? If you like that stuff,
happy.
that's fine. Obviously, my opinion is only my opinion. It is the same value as anybody else's. But I like my opinion better than anybody else's opinion. So
that was one of my favorite.
I don't like hard magic.
On a good podcast or a video. That was very good.
I love video games. Like, I just don't love them in my books. I don't want to read game mechanics. I want to play them.
I'm actually totally with you on that end of it. I have no problem with an RPG. I just don't read it. Because I'm gonna go play an RPG. But
right.
Yeah, but I have no problem with someone else if they want to. Because there's also people I know. Like I have a friend, and every time I used to play the PlayStation or the PC, he preferred to sit behind me and watch me play. And I could never grasp that. But obviously, it's just the way other people are. But yeah, I would rather play it myself.
Yeah, no, I just look. It's just not. It's really fundamentally just not my thing. But like Mike asked me to go thermonuclear indirectly, so I did.
I just don't expect really. Like I was like, damn, Christopher is on this.
I hate. I hate hard magic. Look, I get like people wanting to understand the rules and stuff, but the word occult actually means hidden. So maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you shouldn't understand this stuff actually.
I personally like it. I like a little bit of in between. I don't think everyone should understand how things work all the time. I think it's a thing like in the books. I always hate when there's always a person who goes, oh yeah, so here's how everything works from start to finish, and I just know. I like there being some understanding because I think magic replaces science in a lot of fantasy. I like there being some understanding of things, but also large amounts of mystery. And if you have a little bit of soft and a little bit of hard, please don't take that out of context.
The GIF has already been made, right?
Yeah, it's already there. If you have a little bit of soft magic and a little bit of hard magic, it allows you so much more flexibility as a writer because you can create your rules and definitions in your own head and how things work, but it also opens you up to be able to use different things in different ways later on in the books. I like a little bit of both, but I'm not the biggest fan of when it goes into hard magic and everything is like maths calculations. That's not what I like to read personally. Man,
I gotta go ahead and warn you. Stormlight Book 4. Get ready for some homework, baby.
Yeah, no, I know. But for instance, Stormlight in the first book and the half of the second book that I've read so far, the magic system is reasonably soft with a little bit of that of hard magic in it. Whereas when I went to Mistborn, the magic is a lot more hard form straight away. And I actually bounced off that pretty quickly. I never finished the first Mistborn book, but I do really like The Way of Kings, and I'm really enjoying Words of Radiance.
Well, let me having just like violated the Geneva Convention. Why don't I like try to answer like a little bit here, right? The problem is that like hard magic and soft magic are like modern categories that we as nerds have invented, right?
Yeah.
And one of those is more closely related to actual occult and esoteric practices. And one of them is an invention of Jack Vance's and Gary Gygax's for D&D, fundamentally, right? That is a product of this genre in and of itself, right? Now, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be rules that govern how occult forces function in a fantasy novel.
Yeah.
But like, if I'm reading your book and I'm thinking about mana points and like, have I freebased enough tin to channel Fireball? Then I am not having a good time. I just don't like that stuff.
And I think actually, go ahead. No, go.
Oh, no. I like fantasy, right? And Shauna's work is an exemplar of this point, that is connected to the mythologies and traditions of our actual world. That's why I love Tolkien so much. This is a thing that like George Martin does really well. And I'm like by no means like George Martin's like biggest fan in the universe, but when there's magic in A Song of Ice and Fire, it's magic. Awesome, right? And if like everybody is just doing weird things because they ate enough basalt, then I just don't like it.
I think one of the comments there from Viv, who's actually a mod on my Discord, she said, definitely hard magic. I don't like magic that does what characters need in a given situation. And I think that's probably where the misconception comes, is that how people view what hard magic is. Having rules to a magic system doesn't just make it hard magic. So you can have magic that doesn't just do what a character needs in a given situation without understanding the fundamental mechanics of exactly how you charge your mana. And without understanding, like, you can have rules. Like, you go to Star Wars, the softest magic system in the world. You can't use the Force to bring someone back to life unless it's Rey. And that's where people kind of do their lid off, because you broke what was an unspoken rule in a soft magic system. And they do have Force healing, I think, some of the Legend universe, but there's a difference between Force healing and necromancy, essentially. And that's where I think we get this weird kind of, this is so off topic from novellas, but that's where you get this difference when people talk about what hard magic is. So, like, people say, oh, we want hard magic because I don't want it to be able to do everything. I was like, no, it doesn't have to be hard magic to have boundaries. You can have some boundaries, you just don't have to know the mechanics of them.
What I said when I reviewed your book is, like, I grew up reading Lord of the Rings. Why can Gandalf do magic? Because he's a fucking wizard. That's all I need to know. I don't need to. Wow, how did he do that? Can you explain what the temperature was and why he was able to do that?
Yeah.
I don't give a shit. It's a fantasy book.
I think what can be good is, like, in mine, I kind of do a little bit of both. So it's a softer magic system, but I do want the reader to. I like to explain some small bits. Like with the rules, in that I want to explain to a reader why someone who's particularly powerful can't just fucking end the world instantaneously. Can't just melt all the polar ice caps at once. Can't just bring mountains to the ground on their own. There has to be like a small understanding of limitations in the type of book that I write, because there is a lot more people who can use magic, as opposed to, you go to Lord of the Rings, the world is magical, but there are only a few wizards. So it's different, and they're very good aligned or bad aligned. So, like, you don't need to know, can Gandalf bring a mountain down? Because he's not going to do that. He's a good dude. He's there. Radagast might at some stage.
Hard magic or no magic, Christopher? Where are you on that?
I've given the option, no magic.
This guy's a sci-fi writer, right? I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Hey, whoa. Magic is just technology,
right?
That we don't understand.
That's what Arthur Clarke said.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I know that this is a hot take, right? But
no, I like the idea, but like when I first started getting real big back into reading fantasy again, like around 2015, I was blown away like with Brent Weeks and Lightbringer, and with Stormlight Archive and Mistborn. I was like, this is really neat. A lot of the fantasy I read never really did this kind of stuff. But then it just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and to the point where someone recommended a series to me called Cradle, where I'm like, why would anybody think that I like this? I feel like I'm reading someone grinding XP with their Final Fantasy character. Why did people think that I liked it? Like, it has a huge fandom, and I'm okay with that. I don't get quite as upset about it as Christopher does. I just don't understand how that's fun to read.
Yeah, there's a breakdown. Like you have progression fantasy and you have lit RPG. And I think we've established Christopher does not like lit RPG.
Just he has opinions.
But like progression fantasy has so many different stuff. A lot of stuff that I don't like. For instance, I don't like reading a lot of progression fantasy. But Dragon Ball Z is progression fantasy. Like when you have clear defined evolution levels, that's essentially progression fantasy. And I really liked watching Dragon Ball Z, one of my favorite things ever growing up. But I just can't read it for whatever reason. It does feel a little bit too much like, I don't know, yeah, like grinding for XP and trying to get up to the next level. And you've clearly defined powers. If you're Super Saiyan 3, you are stronger than Super Saiyan 2. And it's like, it's much harder to read, but I love watching the show.
That's not the good part, of playing Final Fantasy, though, right? It's not.
Yeah, it's not the grinding.
It's like everything else. And so, like, isolating the worst part of that experience just seems very, very strange to me. I'm with Ryan. I would much rather play Elden Ring than read any of this sort of stuff. But I was gonna say something to this point. I just lost it. Never mind.
I would say Wheel of Time is solid. I feel like the Magic's never to a point where you had the two different halves of the one power. I feel like he doesn't really get super into detail with it.
Wheel of Time is kind of the category that I gave there earlier. It's a blend of hard and soft.
Yeah. Because
they have very clear rules and limitations and how the different parts of Magic work and how they have to work together and how ℕ𝕦𝕤𝕚𝕚 works. And they do have quite a lot of defined limits, boundaries, and rules. But
I never feel like Robert's sitting me down and saying, okay, here's how this works,
exactly.
And here's how that works, and this has to do this, but if this does this, then that can't happen. And this is where it all started. This is how it became to be light. And this is what happens if it's lights. It's just so much in Stormlight.
Yeah, it's less. It's done in a really natural way. He spends less time on it than he does describing the tacits on a chair. But it is a little bit hard and soft Magic. Well, if Philip says it must be true, except Malazan.
Yeah, I feel like Wheel of Time that can kind of, there is a comfort spot in the middle there. I think to me that's just enough. That's just enough.
There's a difference when you sit down, when you read Sanderson and he goes into the hard Magic. He does explain it in the book like a textbook. You're going through like you're reading a rule book for the Magic. Whereas in Wheel of Time, it is very gradual how you learn, because you learn with Rand. Rand is a proxy for the reader. And you learn with Rand how the Magic works bit by bit by making mistakes, by fucking up, and by small little corrections. Whereas I think, Sanderson tends to explain things in chunks.
And I never feel like I'm reading someone's D&D game or tabletop game, Christopher. So.
You're going to give them a heart attack.
Where the danger to this, I think, comes in, though, is that it starts to prime people who want to be writers to think that it's necessary. I was an editor for 7 years, right? And so I, like, invariably, when somebody was pitching a fantasy novel to me, they would start by explaining their magic system. And I would ask them, like, you don't have to have one of those, right? Like, I know that the man in Utah says you do, but, like, you can do something else, right? And, like, look, I want to be clear. Like, I have an immense amount of professional respect for Brandon Sanderson. I love the way that he gets work done, and I love how he treats his readers, and like all of that stuff's great, right? I just don't like his material. That's it. As Mike knows, I don't like a lot of stuff. It's like my thing.
I'm so convinced he doesn't like movies and TV at all.
I'm the world's oldest 30-year-old.
You guys want to see? He loves Dune, but we're going to be doing our Dune 2 review here in, I don't know, about a week. We're going to think Christopher hates it. Just to let you guys know.
I'm so upset. I said to Amy, my wife, I love going to the cinema. Right? I really love it. Like, it's just a thing that I do. I go on my own, no problem. I love going to the cinema. And in the last, 7-8 months, there's just been nothing that has made me want to go. And at all. And the only thing that's made me want to go is Dune 2.
Yeah.
And I was looking, I was like, okay, there's like, because the best cinema with IMAX is like 3 hours away from us up in Auckland. We have loads of cinemas here, but the big IMAX one is up in Auckland. So I was like, okay, I want to go to this. She's like, okay, great. Can we go? We're going up in 3 weeks and we'll tie it in. I was like, that's like 2 weeks after it's out.
Yeah.
Like, why am I doing that? And
that definitely deserves a special trip. Yeah.
Have you seen the second Dune yet? Anybody?
No, it's not.
Have you seen it?
I'm going on Sunday. That's like 5 days before it opens everywhere. They do this thing, fan first screening. But thankfully, I only have to drive about 20 miles to the closest IMAX. That's going to be part of it. So
I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's going to be cool.
I'm very excited.
Shauna, I'm sorry. I feel like we completely cut you off there. Do you have any opinion on the hard magic versus soft magic versus no magic fight?
I think that's why I wasn't as involved in that conversation because obviously it doesn't annoy me.
I'm not wild about it. I understand why people are. I just, I don't go through here.
I haven't maybe just thought about it so much. I think because my magical system comes from Irish mythology, so almost the rules, what there are, and they're not really hard and fast, but they're already there for me. So I didn't have to construct the magical system. But I completely agree with what Christopher said about when people start to write fantasy books, that they can get really, really bogged down and spend years constructing the magical system without like kind of forgetting to write the story. System? Yeah, like write the story, that's the fun part. But I guess for some people, maybe setting up the world is the fun part, and and that's probably why they never get to actually.
There's a reason why world builders disease exists.
Yeah.
It's a thing, because I know for myself and a lot of people who start, it's your love of fantasy and your love of the creation of these worlds that's what makes you want to write. For a lot of people, not everyone, and so it's very easy to get lost in the creation of that world as you're part of it. You're like knee deep in the world, and knee deep is probably a bit too shallow. You're about neck deep in the world.
Yeah.
See, now I feel like we're talking about magic.
I've never been like that. I've always just started to write.
Oh, we stopped talking about novellas about 35 minutes ago.
ℓ𝕤𝕤𝕤, I had the hot take in that the magic system was fine. I just felt like it was just there just because what Ryan just said, where world building has become like a disease. I feel like he felt like he had to do it. That's what I feel like. And I've talked to James. I think he's a really, really awesome guy. I felt like his magic system in Lycanius was deserved and it was really well done. I don't feel like it was done badly in ℓ𝕤𝕤. I just feel like the story would be exactly the same without it. Just me. Has anybody else here read that, the ℓ𝕤𝕤?
I haven't, but my entire Discord has not shut the fuck up about it since it's come out. And I actually think I've only seen James a few times. I never talked with him, but he seems like a really nice dude. But I hate him for the will of the many because it beat me out on so many of those top books lists last year. Right. I was doing really well, and then it came out, and I was like, "You fucking."
So you hate it more than Lonesome Dove? Hey, I've seen Jodorowsky's Dune, and here's the thing: is everybody carries on about how great Jodorowsky's Dune was and how great that movie would have been. I think that movie would have been crap as far as as a fan of the book, because you watch that documentary. It was going to be nothing like the book. Would it have been a neat movie? Yeah, definitely. But it completely evolved into something that wasn't Dune at all.
I just saw a comment that actually links back into the whole point of the panel. And it says, novellas don't sell. It's not fun. I don't agree. I don't agree at all. They sell less than main books usually because people aren't conditioned. I think part of novellas is it's about reader conditioning, which is a weird sentence to say when you're just talking openly, but it's the way I would think about it. With mine, I have released them and marketed them in a very specific way that makes them, because I went the opposite route to Christopher. I made them an integral part of the series, interwoven, whereas Chris was saying he's trying to create books that reward the really deep fanatical readers who are there to support him the whole time. And that is something that I like to put into the books. I do that for rereaders. I try to leave loads of little nuggets for stuff I know I'm going to put in later on, so that the people who are rereading it are rewarded. They notice stuff they never noticed before. But I think depending on how you condition your readers to read your series will massively affect the sales of your novellas. I know now that I have my third novella out, and it's quite clear that it's going book novella. The sales for my novellas are really strong. I'd say there's probably a 65% read through from book 2 to novella. It's still higher to book 3. There are people who are skipping it. but it's fairly good. Like they're selling pretty well, and that's without much information. I could probably go in and find more. That's without tracking a lot of sales.
Christopher, yours are selling pretty well, right? I mean, I pay over $100 for each one of yours because of the shipping from the UK. But
well, for the collector's editions, to be clear, you can just buy the normal ones.
Got time for that.
Yeah, well, yeah. The deluxe ones are pretty nice. He sources
nice.
from the same place as Folio Society, but use the same printer. But but yeah, well, yeah, that's the problem. Is this big puddle in the way. Yeah, no, I mean, I hate that shipping is as bad as it is for those UK editions, but here we are. But like to get back to the novellas don't sell thing. I mean, I agree with everything Ryan said. They don't as much, sure, but like when you're a working writer, right? You have to think in sort of concentric circles, right? You have to do stuff that's like for everybody or for anybody who might read your books, right? But then you can do a lot for your for yourself, for your family, right? By doing stuff that's for the people who really, really care, right? And so you write the novellas for people who really like the books, but then you can do even more specific things, right? Like, I did the special editions, right? I can only sell 1,000 of those. So that's for the people who really, really wanted to show up, right? And you should be doing all of these things. This is, right, a point that Brandon Sanderson makes that I completely agree with, right? In his letter about his Kickstarter. He's talking about how publishers should make books available at these different price points. And he's completely right. He really understands the business. And writing novellas in the first place is something that you can do that's in one of those sort of middle circles. Daniel, Mike is lying. They don't necessarily cost $100. You can go on Amazon and get them for $8. It's just that there was a limited edition UK version.
These guys, they're gorgeous. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that the shipping costs more than the book.
Translated shipping got real bad after a certain series of events in 2020. It was already not great, but it got substantially worse.
Printing costs got ridiculous too.
Paper got expensive. That's why I have 7 books now instead of 5. But yeah. So you write novellas expecting, I think, to sell less than you do of a novel, right? I would be flabbergasted if one of my novellas performed comparably to one of my novels in a good way.
But is that not also because bookstores don't really stock novellas? I think when people say novellas don't sell, that's been the opinion. Well, but it was definitely true 10 years ago when bookstores were the only place that sold books. But we've moved away from that now, and I definitely have seen a huge resurgence in novellas in the last 10 years, more so in the last 5, more so in the last 2, because I think for people who read on Kindle and ebooks, novellas are fantastic, and they're priced at 99p often, or $1 or $2. So if you want a story to read when you're commuting or traveling or by the pool, a novella is actually a fantastic thing to buy. But I think the move that you're seeing towards novellas is because of ebooks, and because of the self-published fantasy market as well. I think if you were to go back 10 years to the kind of bookstore only market, that would be completely correct. Novellas didn't sell because they weren't stocked there.
I think a big part of it for me, the bookstores were huge, but I think a really big part of it, like I said earlier about reader conditioning, and I think the indie market has had a huge impact on this, right? Because when you have publishers and the publishers tell you novella won't sell, right? So authors aren't writing novellas, and then also the publishers aren't buying novellas, and then the ones they buy they won't put in bookstores, and then it comes to, and I'm not talking right now, I'm saying in the past, and say you come into the indie market, and say for instance I come in, all right, I'm able to define my own publishing strategy. I decide that I'm going to publish novellas, and then I can create my own reader conditioning. I can say this is how the story should be read. I'm making them an integral part of the series, and I don't have someone who tells me this won't sell. I just do it, and that bypasses the traditional gate that was stopping a lot of people getting the novellas out there. But also, when I have, say, the broken binding, okay, so ebooks are a massive impact on this hugely. But say the broken binding, it's all physical books, hardbacks. What I find now, and talking to Matt, when people who discovered my series go into the Broken Binding, they buy all of it, all the novellas, all at once. They buy all of it together because they consider it part of the series. And a lot of the time, what will happen is some authors might have novellas, but they won't get marketed the same way as the novels do. And that's where the sales can be hindered, because you're publishing your series and then you also have a novella over here. But most of these readers don't know about this novella, so they're not buying it. But if it's in the series and they're conditioned to see it as part of the series, you're kind of taking away that gap between the reader reading your series and the reader reading your novella. So even like the smallest things that I've noticed is a lot of authors I know who have novellas, when they have like their reading order or their also buy and stuff, they don't list the novellas in the series. So like if I open my book, it will say like, reading order, and the reading orders will include book 1 novella, book 2 novella, whichever way it is. And so instantly a reader who doesn't know about the novella, as soon as they open the book, they know about the novella. And I think that the publishing strategies that have come in with a stronger independent publishing market have really influenced novellas, because a lot more authors have a bigger say over how they're going to publish.
Well, Shauna, you were saying like they don't really carry them in the stores. I know that it sounds funny now because Stephen King could write his grocery list on a napkin and probably sell it in the store. But originally, that's why he did different seasons the way that he did, because he didn't feel like if he had released those 4 novellas over time, they wouldn't have done anything, because they would have never really gotten any attention. So he released all 4 in a collection and just called it a different title. That way, people just thought it was a new book, and that's why I thought it was really cool. There's always that plan.
Well, that's sort of like what I'm doing too, because my physical edition is going to have all 3 of my novellas in it. But that's also because of printing costs, and I'll be able to get that book into the bookstores, whereas I don't think a novella by itself would have gotten to the bookstores.
It's such a weird one, like, because that's a choice that we had to make as well, with packaging it as one or packaging them as separate novellas. And obviously, because I'm writing them one by one and I want them to be read in a certain way, I kind of have to package them individually. And they sell really well in hardback.
Right, it's really hard to be like, okay, this novella collection here, but make sure you read this book between these 2 stories in this one collection. That'd be kind of tough.
But I think when it comes to physical bookstores, it is different. It's definitely different. It's something you have to take into account.
There's probably a profit margin question here too. I would have to like talk to people in publishing to get a better sense of, because the other sort of we talked around is that traditional publishers just don't buy them, right? When I wrote Lesser Devil, I asked ℓ because I wanted to make sure I wasn't getting any trouble. Do you want this? And they said pretty simply, like, we only publish novellas by Patrick Rothfuss. Right? So there's probably
that's all he wrote after this.
It's so specific.
Yeah, well,
he gave a whole 1, didn't he? Yeah,
that's all they had at the time, right? I mean, like, they probably would do other ones, but when Nnedi Okorafor wrote the Binti books, she went to tour because they weren't going to print them, I thought, is my understanding. And so like Tor.com will do them. I think they often do them as like ebook originals, but most traditional publishers just aren't interested in even messing with them. And so you like kind of have to you just kind of have to sort of figure out your own way as an author sometimes, even traditionally published, right? Because they'll tell you stuff like you were saying. They'll say like, don't do that, and you have to decide whether or not you should listen to them or trust your instincts. And I found my instincts are usually the right call, right? Because the novellas are doing pretty good. So
it's really funny when you say stuff like that, because it comes into my head is like the traditional publishing world. I just imagine like loads of publishers all in one room and the whole house is made of cards, and someone goes to pull a card. It's like, no, don't do it. It's like, why? Because it's working right now, and we don't know what will happen if we change it.
Well, that's basically how it is, right? Because this is super obvious, like high level. If you like look at what they do, right? Like something will work, right? Like Twilight worked, and they're like, nobody move. Like, why did this happen? And then they'll like put out another vampire book and it doesn't do as well, but it does better than like the other random YA things they're trying. So they're like, we'll just print vampire books until everybody wants to throw up. And then we will. Do you have
any idea how many Dragon Rider books are coming out this year?
No.
After the success of a few over the last like 2 or 3 years, oh my God. It's like mid double figures at the least. just of that specific subgenre. There's one that I haven't read it, but I was laughing at the name because it was literally just called Dragon Rider.
Yeah, I saw.
I was like, that's a bit on the nose.
Wow, creative.
Could be an amazing book, and I'm sure the author is lovely, but just the title was very, very blunt.
Yeah, well, you get the same thing though on the indie divide, right? Only it's like a lot more. I think it's a lot more maybe unconscious. Maybe that's not the right word, but like you get this. I mean, this is why like lit RPG is a thing, right? Is because it plays very well, and so people will write into these like very precise niches to sort of target algorithm. To target the algorithm, and like that's great if like that's the thing you like. Like I have questions if the thing you like is lit RPG, but like congratulations, you have an infinite supply of whatever you like now, and that's wonderful for you. Oh, no. Where that's a loss though, right? Is then you talk to readers and like nobody has any like thing in common, like really, right? There's not like if we were all fans in like 1960, like we were all reading the same books, right? And it's kind of a loss that like everybody's like has some like vague intersections at the top, right? Like everyone reads Erickson, everybody reads Sanderson, everybody reads Jordan, you know, but like a lot of people's like random reads are sort of like very disjointed, non-overlapping, and it sort of sucks when there's like not as much to talk about. At least that's how it feels to me. It feels to me like people just don't have as much in common as far as what they're reading goes anymore. But maybe that's just me. I don't know.
Is that because though that there's just so much more choice and selection?
Yeah, that's totally it. It's just like there's some sort of weird Tower of Babel thing. I think as a consequence of that. Like I had no idea Piers Brown existed until I was told I was ripping him off. Like I just had no clue. Like I
series confused and actually thought it was the same thing.
I missed like a whole New York Times bestseller because there's just like so much stuff.
Man, there is so much of that stuff everywhere, and I find it really funny. It's one thing that I keep trying to say to people. I was like, when you read a book, you need to understand that your preconceptions are affecting what you see. So what you might see as someone obviously stealing from someone else is not always the case. Like I remember there was a Reddit post. I don't respond to fucking anything with that sort of stuff, but it was just saying loads of stuff, and I ended up responding to it. And they're basically saying that I stole. I have a town called Camelin. Like, oh, you stole that Camelin from the Wheel of Time. I was like, actually, no, that's named after Camelin, who is one of my favorite character in The Faithful and the Fallen. Has nothing to do with that. And I was like, and you stole, your place is called Argona. It's obviously stolen from Argonia or the Argonians and the Argonian marshes in Skyrim. I was like, I played Skyrim once. I enjoyed it, but I never finished it.
Christopher, you never get accused of ripping stuff off, though, do you?
No, not even once. Isn't Camelin the place where Arthur is killed as well? I
was once told I ripped off Lord of the Rings because my characters went through a mountain pass. That is no joke. That was in the review, and it was like seriously, a mountain pass. Everyone knows you took that from Tolkien. I was like, what?
Bro, don't you know that
Tolkien didn't even cross the mountain in that one. They had to go inside it. They couldn't get over it.
Dude, I got told that James Arlington ripped off Wheel of Time because the magic is the same. And I'm like, anyway, they're not.
Elemental magic.
Who do you get compared to, Christopher?
Frank Herbert, which was on purpose. Gene Wolfe, which was also on purpose.
Dan Simmons.
Dan Simmons, which was Dan Simmons taught me that I could write like other writers. He stole his whole internet from Neuromancer in those books. So
but I think it's almost like a loss of nuance nowadays, where people look at stuff and they can't see that I loved some authors and their stories, and they will always influence me. And I will always put little homages into the books intentionally because I want to reference those books. I want to go, hey, like, yeah, here's a little Easter egg. I loved this series. Like I had this creatures called Fades in my book. They have other names, but I wanted one of their main names to be Fade because I wanted to reference Wheel of Time. Because the looming dark character is in so many stories. You go back to the ring wraiths in Lord of the Rings, like it's exactly the same, which you've referred to loads of times, Mike. And like I specifically wanted one of their names to be the same name as in the Wheel of Time because I wanted to reference and go, I love this series. And it's like, no, you clearly stole everything.
It's so rich coming from Wheel of Time fans. I'm like, you mean the book that stole everything from Lord of the Rings?
I think it's one of those things where for me, I think when I read books, I don't really care if I see some of the same stuff again. It's because the story's different. As long as you've written the characters differently, the story that I'm reading to me is how the characters experience the world, like what their story
I enjoy it. I don't feel like it's being derivative if it's just a hat tip.
Yeah, I got a review once that said, did Christopher think that no one except him watched Doctor Who when he like referenced this line? And I'm like, no, I thought you expressly had seen it and would like chuckle a little bit, man. Yeah. People are.
Bruce Brown fucking says "Bye Felicia" in his book, for God's sakes.
Bye Felicia. Things. Nice. I think like my favorite one was in the series we have the ℕ𝕤𝕣𝕚𝕠𝕟𝕠, which are the soul blades, and they're essentially like they're swords forged from light that is like directly from your soul. And I was so worried that people were going to go, oh my God, they're like lightsabers from Star Wars, okay? Because they're different colors. Nobody fucking makes that at all. And people are like, you obviously stole it from Stormlight Archive, which I hadn't read. I only read Way of Kings last year. And then like, you stole that from Stormlight Archive and your knights are the Knights Radiant. I was like, it's stolen from Stormlight Archive. I was like, no, I based them off the Knights Templar in Space Marine power armor in a fantasy setting with swords that came from the soul of a god. That was literally what I wrote down as my reference for who these guys are going to be. And they're like, yeah, Knights Radiant. I was like, who's Knights Radiant? Don't play dumb, Ryan. I haven't read the book.
So this one's actually for Christopher. I feel like it can apply to everyone here. He says, when your series is complete, will you please continue writing the occasional novella in your universe because there's so much to explore. So I guess what I want to present to everyone here is, when your series are complete, do you feel like you'll ever fully walk away from it because you can just keep on building on it this way if you choose to?
No, well, one, hi, Dennis. And two, I'll do one better. I will probably write novels. I will write novels in this universe
after it's done?
Well, yeah.
So Hadrian's story's done? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Hadrian's like, there's a whole galaxy out there. It can't all just be about one guy. If I have a science fiction story that could conceivably go in Sun Eater, it will. Like, why reinvent the galaxy?
Right. If you got a universe that's established, I feel like it would be really hard to walk away from it.
Yeah.
But even just from a professional point of view, like you have readers who love that series, and there's a difference between trying to like cash cow a series and actually trying to legitimately go back and write more stories that you are passionate about, that your readers will love, that will help you to continue writing professionally. It's a hard thing to not do. He did invent mountains, for sure.
Facts.
Yeah.
Shauna, since you're already going to be writing in the same universe, I guess we kind of know that answer, but I feel like it's limitless, right?
I think once you've done your world building, even though we've said that you're not meant to do that too much, it's kind of seductive because it works and you have like everything's already in place. But I do think once the next 3 books are done, I would definitely at least take a break and move on to something different. Because by then I'll have written 6 novels, at least 3 novellas. I've got ideas for a few more novellas. And so I'm already cheating on my main series with other stuff. So I might have to go over to that full time.
Zen, I don't think that Pierce Brown is Christopher Ruocchio. I just think that they were separated at birth or a different path of the beam. They were actually brothers or something like that. That's what I think. They were related in some regard. So there we go.
Yeah, well, we both are thinking about the Roman Empire all the time, right?
That's it. But he did say once he's done writing Red God, he'd be more than happy to.
That question, you saw that question going around social media for ages. And, ask your boyfriend or your husband or whatever how often they think of the Roman Empire. And like Amy asked me on a walk, and I was like, Amy, you do understand that the question itself is going to give a presupposed response. Like if you ask me that question out loud, like I'm going to think about it more and play up the answer. But yes, most days.
My wife just looked at me and said, I already know the answer, and walked away. So
yeah, all the time.
I never stop. Yeah, exactly.
Everything's just so Roman.
Glowing swords were created by Star Wars and Sanderson, apparently.
Yeah, no one's ever heard of Doc Smith. To John's comment, Christopher Baroque sounds cool. I'll take that. That should be my pen name.
Oh man, Michael Sullivan's world, like he's got like 4 different timelines in his universe he's writing in right now. So yeah, he just get bigger.
Like I have for mine when I'm finished, I already have a series like bare bones outline 3,000 years in the past, and then one like 1,500 years in the past. I'm not a big fan. I'm very uncertain as to whether because it's fantasy as opposed to sci-fi, I'm very uncertain as to whether I'd write another one in the future. I feel like I want this to be the base timeline and do stuff further in the past for me personally. It would have to be, and that's only because I just ideas haven't hit me for something in the future. It's a maybe, but I think writing. I have some other series in different worlds that I am contemplating. As I said before, I really want to write like a horror fantasy blend with vampires that fuck you up and don't sparkle, and kind of like a zombie outbreak. But
vampires and zombies.
Whoa, watch out. But it's like nobody see the modern films like zombie outbreak film, like, or you'll see like The Walking Dead and stuff, and we go back to the bare bones of when the outbreak happened and the world ended. And I would love to explore something like that in a really vicious, gritty, dark fantasy setting, at some stage. But there's so many books to write, so little time. Unless you're Christopher, and that way you can write a books a year.
He's a machine. He's a machine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's like the character in ℚ𝕦𝕤𝕤𝕤𝕤, Stephen King's ℚ𝕦𝕤𝕤𝕤, which is an awful book, but just has so many neat ideas in it. Because that's when he was at the peak of his drug abuse.
I'm going to actually hire Christopher to ghostwrite a series for me now. He'll do it in the next week, and then it'll be finished.
In that book, there was people creating like crazy inventions, and this one person, because Stephen King always writes an author into a story. An author creates a typewriter that will actually type while they sleep. So it would just like be reading their brain while they sleep, and it will type for them. So that's what Christopher
did. And then the giant block of cheese chased me down the hallway.
I feel like we're exaggerating this conversation a little bit. Christopher writes like 1,000 to 2,000 words a day. I'm sort of like
I'm actually saying.
Yeah, it's like you were saying, Ryan. Like it might actually take me till 2 a.m. to get there. Like I very rarely will have one of those days where it's like, oh, that was 6,000 words for some reason. It's just I work every day.
And actually that's a big thing, and I talk to a lot of people and they say, oh, you're a really fast writer. And it's like, actually, if you put me next to other people, I'm not that fast. I'm really consistent though. I write every day, and so I'm trying to get back to a place where I don't write on weekends, just because I want to have that free time.
Sure.
But I never want to set it that I don't write on weekends as a hard rule, because I like writing. So if I sit there and I want to do some writing, I'm going to do it. But I do consistently write. And I think that could be the difference. You have people who write like 5,000 words, 6,000 word days, right? But they do that twice in a month, right? Now they're on 11,000 words, but I've written 50 because I wrote 2,000 every day. And I think that can be a big difference. And sometimes people mistake consistency for speed.
Yeah, I think so. I am a fast writer. I actually can write a lot in a day, but my first drafts are hideous.
Mine doesn't do this. So, is that your camera, or is that something StreamYard does?
Oh yeah, hold on. I think it does this too.
Oh,
yeah, it's pretty cool. Except that I figured out it did it while I was on a stream, before. That was a bit scary.
It's not a one-to-one comparison, Christopher, but I think something as a reader that I get a lot is, I don't know how you read so fast. I read like 4 books a month. It's like every other booktuber out there's like, I did 28 books this month. Like, really? 4 books is a lot? I was like, dude, just don't watch as much TV and stay on social media.
That's the thing. You have to treat it like something that matters, right? Like this is then you run into with people who like, they want to write and are like, I just don't have the time. And I'm like, man, you like probably are right. Like, this is my job now. So like earlier, it was a lot harder because I had like a regular job, and then I would have to get up like, well, I'm getting up really early now because I have to write when my daughter is asleep. But I would have to get up like super early and write before I went to work, and then like, at lunch and then after to get stuff done. Like that sucks. Like I didn't do anything else. Like, this is why like I still don't watch TV. I
love hearing this though, because like I'll get that and people will say, oh, it's easy for you to say because you write full time. I was like, yeah, but I didn't. I was doing 12-hour shifts and night shifts in the lab. I was getting up at 6 a.m, working from 7 a.m till 7 p.m, coming home, eating food, going to the gym, and then at like 9 p.m. I would write until like 2 a.m, 3 a.m, and I'd get up at 6 again and go to work. And I did that for a year. straight, 3-4 hours sleep every day, and I wrote every single day, and I wanted to jump off a goddamn bridge.
Yeah, Christopher, you didn't go full time till like 2 years ago, right?
Yeah. I wrote Empire of Silence, waiting tables. And going to college and interning. So like, sometimes it's hard. Like, I'm not like bragging about that. I'm just saying, like, I really wanted to do it. Right. Like,
you have to really fucking want it.
It was important to me. Right. And there are like other things that weren't. Like, I still, like, I've been trying to figure out like what I could take out of my day so that I could play more Elden Ring. Because like I'm down to like, I guess I have to like lock my phone in a box, because I think like if I can shave 30 minutes off looking at my phone off, I could maybe take one extra dungeon. But like, you have to like do. Someone was asking like, how long does it take to get those 2,000 words? Like, sometimes it's a whole day, but like lately, like I can probably be done. I get up at like 4:35 right now. I can be done by like 10, which is by about the time my daughter's like really properly awake. And then after that, it's like answering emails and doing random things. So
yeah, that can happen. I can get it done in a few hours, and sometimes it'll take me all day, like all day. And I love this comment: writing a book isn't worth taking 10 years off your life by sleeping 3 hours a night. 1, I disagree. 2, I have no idea where you got the science or maths to tell me I was taking 10 years off my life. But even when I wasn't working in the lab, even now, I have only slept normally 5 to 6 hours a day since I was like 10. I don't sleep a lot. But for me, like, this is, people always, one thing I tell to a lot of writers who want to like go full time, and they're saying, I really want to do this full time, I want to do that. I was like, step back for a second and understand that the sentence, if you do what you love, you won't work a day in your life, is completely untrue. I have never worked harder in my entire life. I've never been more stressed, but the difference is I'm okay with it. I love it. I love what I do, but my God, I've never worked harder, never had more stress. There's just so much that people, you don't, like anything, you always want what you see over here, but it might not be as straightforward as you think it is.
Yeah.
I'd rather do that than working 8 hours a day for someone else. Sorry, Shauna.
Yeah, I'm the same. No, I was just going to say, I'm like, obviously similar story to the two of yous. I always wrote when I was younger. And then when I had my children, the time disappeared. And I went through like a good period of time where I didn't write at all. And whenever like people asked me about my writing, it was just always like, I don't have time. And when I talked about time, I meant like a whole day to write. Yeah. The way I used to. But it took me a couple of years to realize that ship had just sailed. I don't have whole days to write anymore. My time isn't my own. So what I did then was I wrote every other night. So me and my husband took turns doing the bedtime routine. And I just wrote every other night for maybe an hour or two. So maybe from 8 to 10 p.m. But you see, when you have like very short set windows of time and you're thinking about it during the rest of the day, I would find I could write an awful lot in those 2-hour windows. And then in a year, like my book was written. So I'd always encourage people, saying, oh, if I had time to write, I would do it, or I would love to do it if I had more time. But if you love it, you have to make the time and you have to find it.
Yeah. And it's a funny one because a lot of people said, oh, I bet you write so much more now that you're full time. And I was like, honestly, no, I don't. I write about the same amount, but I have a happier existence.
Yeah.
That's the difference. I have the time to do something else. I play Ultimate Frisbee on Mondays and Thursdays now. Like, I have a life. I can, sit down and watch some TV, watch an episode of TV with my wife. Like, I don't sit down and write an extra 6,000 words because my brain just doesn't function that way. And I realized when I was doing my job that, obviously it's ideal to be able to sit there with large blocks of time and write, but I wasn't going to get ideal. So I had to make do with what I had. And,
Right. Just make sure you don't trigger more people by telling them to work hard again. Okay. I mean, I know that people don't like to hear that, but yeah, you got to work hard. You got to work hard.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
A top 10 novellas of all time. I don't think that would be a very fun video. So I doubt I'll be I'll be making that one. But yeah. I mean, the fact that, like I said, all three of you have an incredible output. I think that shows that you guys are all working very hard. I'm very actually impressed that none of you are actually showing any grays yet. So F you very much, but you know, hang on to it while you can, you know.
Well, I have had like a chronic neck problem for like the last 2 years, like since I moved here. And I'm only now getting sorted out. I had like an x-ray yesterday and trying to, you know, maybe not live in pain at 32 would be lovely.
At least make it to your 40s before, you know. Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping for. Like I was talking to the doctor and he was like, you should not have chronic neck pain. You're 32. I was like, yeah, it's just something I'd like to get fixed, please. That would be great. Fix me.
I know, I'm waiting for all these chronic conditions to hit me. I'm 40 in a few months, so
it's not insane.
The ℂ𝕙𝕒𝕠𝕠𝕜 don't age like that. You're fine.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's pretty cold where you're at, right? Is it cold
in Ireland?
Yeah. Yeah. Should age you differently, but I feel like I don't know. I don't know how grays work. Does that have anything to do with the weather? I feel like Christopher would know something.
I don't believe that it does. But
just
I could be
I
wrong.
love that. Christopher writes sci-fi. He should know if your hair goes.
You should know science. Come on, science man. Yeah, no, I have an English degree, Mike. But
I mean, that's apparent. That's apparent. I feel like I have to have a dictionary every time I'm reading one of your books. But hey, you know what? Like I said, you're expanding my vocabulary, not just in English too, in Latin as well.
It's good for people. Yeah.
And if I want to learn like made up languages, Ryan's got me all about apostrophes now. So I mean, I feel like that. And to see Shauna's got like a pronunciation guide at the beginning of her book. So yeah, you guys are teaching me all kinds of things.
If you want to learn some Irish names, you just need to pick up my book and you'll have a full listing.
There you go.
So on the audio book,
when I was reading
the pronunciation guide at the beginning.
No.
Oh,
because it just pronounces everything correctly as it reads through the story.
I'm complete like audiobook inept. So when everybody tells me that Christopher's audiobook narrator, and I've heard that about Ryan as well, that they're just great, and I'm just like, cool, I'll spread the word, you know. But you know, and you can't force yourself to be an audiobooker. You just can't.
You made me think when I was reading Gardens of the Moon, and I was like highlighting like every second fucking word in every page, and I genuinely sat there and I felt like for a few of the pages. Do you ever watch Friends?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's the episode where Joey writes the letter to recommend Monica and Chandler as adopted parents. And it's like, dear human being, now Monica and Chandler are two Homo sapiens with oversized aortic pumps. Yours sincerely, baby kangaroo. I was reading it going, what the fuck? And I would consider myself to have a pretty good vocabulary, and I don't throw loads of those words into all the books all the time because I do like to make them accessible. But when the word is really appropriate, I will always use it. But when I was reading Gardens of the Moon, I was like, I'm going to need to get a thesaurus and a dictionary just on hand. There was just words and funnily enough, though, I don't actually think it was him being overly convoluted because my dad knew a lot of the words. And I think there were words that he grew up with that kind of just went out of fashion. But my God, I did not know what was happening.
I saw on the audiobook front, someone was asking like what we go through picking out narrators, and I'd be interested actually because you know, Brian, you're independently published, right? So like, did you pick? Because I didn't. I was just assigned someone who happened to be great.
So I'm independently published. I'm a hybrid for audiobooks. So I'm published through Podium. So Podium chose the narrator on that one, and I just got very lucky. I got Derek Perkins. He doesn't have, at least at the time, didn't have a very strong fantasy backing, but he was a very well-respected narrator, and he narrated Homo Deus and Sapiens, which are two massive audiobooks.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And that really helped. He's a phenomenal narrator, and yeah, I didn't get much of a say in it because when they came along, they bought the series in audiobook when it was very new. So I didn't have as much leverage as I do now. And I was very much, my mom is dyslexic and she will not read my books. So I needed to get an audiobook so she would read them. So I was like, yeah, well, sign that deal, right? Get your narrator. I just want them in sound, so my mother can read my books.
That's awesome. I was just wondering because I know sometimes people have a little bit more sway than others. What about?
There's definitely some who have a lot more sway, and then there's others who publish the audiobooks themselves too, and they have 100% say.
Yeah.
I think Michael his.
I asked for my audiobook narrator and I got her, so I was very lucky.
Cool. Boom.
It's nice.
She's very, very, very good.
Yeah, she narrates like Colleen Rooney's books. Not Colleen, Sally Rooney. That's Colleen Rooney's married to Wayne Rooney. Completely different person.
The funniest one for me though. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, it's just she does hers and she does like Marion Key. So a lot of like famous Irish writers, she's their audiobook narrator.
It's really funny because I didn't read a lot or listen to a lot of audiobooks until I started publishing. And when I was listening to that, she does amazing different accents between like different regions in Ireland. But it's really funny when she goes on to guys' accents because it's like it's like she's going, what does a guy sound like? I'll just sound like I'm really buff. Everyone's like, oh, and I was like, this must be how other people feel when they hear the male narrator trying to do the female voice. And there's only a few that do.
It is weird. Yeah, because somebody said to me, like, would you narrate the book yourself? And I was almost thinking, would I? And then I was like, no, because like, what would I do if I had to start doing like Marca or like a man? It would just, I couldn't do it. No.
Yeah, I read to my 11-year-old, and he's gotten so spoiled with voices. So we started reading Percy Jackson. He was like, no, you can't use any of the same voices you use in Harry Potter. And I'm like, bro, I'm not Robin Williams. I've got like 8 voices. And he's like, no, voice. And I was like, that sounds just like every other girl in here. I'm like, yeah, I don't know how to tell you this. I don't have multiple female voices unless I just want to randomly make her Irish or something, you know? So I can see how that would be frustrating, you know, trying to do the opposite sex, trying to do a multitude of voices.
It's a really interesting one, though. There are a couple of traditionally published authors who narrate their own books, and it's a quirk between traditional and independent publishing. A traditionally published author who narrates their own book, it's like, oh my God, that's so cool and quirky. Like he's narrating his books or she's narrating her books, and it's really cool. Or if an indie did it, and I've seen indies who have done it, it's like typical indie cheaping out on getting a real narrator. But it's so funny because it's 100% the perception. Because if you're an indie who narrates your own book, you're just not paying for a narrator. But if it's a traditionally published author doing it, then it's like, oh, how cool and quirky. Like they're doing this. It's really cool. Like Justin Lee Anderson, I think, is narrating The Bitter Crown. And he is so Scottish and his voice sounds so cool. And he was really excited about it. And I'm very excited about it too. But I would never do it for my books, ever. But he'll be able to nail it for sure.
My kids texting me what's for dinner, so I guess I'm going to go to kind of ahead and wrap this up. But thank you guys so much. I feel like we could probably talk at least another bit. I don't know. It's probably past. Shauna, is it past your bedtime, or is this like peak writing time for you?
I'm a bit of a night owl, so this is 11 p.m. Here, but that's like I wouldn't go to bed.
This is when Shauna would start drinking.
You youngsters, man. 11 o'clock. I've been asleep for an hour. So. You guys are crazy. But hey, I appreciate all the hard work you guys do, for real. I mean, it's when you live in a world now, and I'm sure it's probably frustrating for authors to hear, I'm not going to start their series until they finish it. The fact that you guys are putting out such a consistent output, I feel safe, you know, telling people you can go ahead and start because they're not going to leave you hanging. And I think just a post Song of Ice and Fire world, a post Patrick Rothfuss world, everybody's scared now. They're scared they're going to get really, really wrapped up and involved in the series.
It's actually one of the reasons why I tried to knuckle down and get as much published as I could, because I wanted to earn trust. I wanted to prove that, like, hey, I'm writing these books, I'm getting them out. Like you can put a bit of faith in me, and it's kind of the reason why with this 4th book, like I've actually said it to a few people already. I was planning to publish it at the end of 2024, but there's a very solid chance I'm going to have to hold it off till early 2025 because Sanderson announced that he's going to launch book 5 of the Stormlight Archive in December, and there's no other author on the planet whose release would affect mine except for Sanderson's, because he is a black hole. And a lot of my readers read his books, and I know that if I publish at the same time he publishes, all of his books will take up every spot on every chart on Amazon and everything else. All the readers will be reading his books, all the YouTubers, all the vloggers, everyone will just completely consume it.
Yeah,
and it
first
would just,
quarter 25, Ryan. That sounds good. First quarter 25.
It's kind of, I have to make the decision. And it's funny because it's just, I would not delay a release for anyone else, but he's like a singularity. There's nothing like him, and it's a gravity well that draws everything in.
Yeah, that's like don't release your album on the same day as a new Metallica record. You know, it's just like what do you think?
With other big authors, I'd almost consider doing it as a wave. Like you ride with it, and you do it all together. But with him, for some reason, it just feels like a very bad idea.
Well, your base is so similar.
Yeah,
it's your reader base.
Your book at the same time as Dune. I noticed this.
What's that?
You're releasing your new book like right around the same time as the new Dune movie. I see.
That was an accident. I will say on the Brandon Sanderson thing, we're using the same printer for my Kickstarter edition of Empire of Silence, and we don't have it yet because they're printing Words of Radiance first. So, I feel you, Ryan.
Yeah.
No. But yeah. Anyway.
It's just one of those things, and it's so big. There is no, you can't actually use him to judge anything against anything because he's his own anomaly. And I think with book 5 coming out, and the fact that he said he's not going to write another book in the series for 10 years, it's like an event. There are some people who are probably going to like mark this as a milestone in their life. It's that intense.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I'm 100% going, if I can get it out in October, I will try, but I don't want to do the book a disservice by rushing it. And if not, then it's probably going to be like first quarter 2025.
It's going to be the last Stormlight book for me, and people are like, "Why you don't like it?" No, I like it, but I was like, he's talking about an 8-year break between the next one, and then he does 3 years between each release. I won't be alive for the end of this series, guys. So I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and walk away at the end of this, which he said you can do, which is really cool.
Oh, that's a tangent, but I got an email. It was a woman who said she was in her 70s, and she was like, "I'm really loving your series. I just hope I live to see the end." That's fucking horrible.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. Shit.
That's right. You got to go ahead and tell her the ending. Tell her who wins. That's the way to do it, right?
They all die in the end.
Yeah. No, we all die in the end.
Everybody does.
Except for the puppy.
Guys, I'm going to wrap this up. But again, thank you guys so much for doing this. And I feel like I'm delaying you guys' writing schedule right now. I feel really, really bad about it.
Oh, no, I was done for the day.
For doing this. It's great.
I hate
now I know not to text Chris between 5 and 10 in the morning because that's his peak writing time. I feel bad now that I do that because.
Oh, no, you're fine.
I'm jealous that you're getting your writing finished by 10 in the morning and have the day, but I'm not jealous of you getting up at 5.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Look, I have a tiny dictator that lives in my house, so I am at her mercy.
They're the worst kind of dictators.
Oh no, the best kind. The best kind. I would much rather a baby than Stalin. So
what about baby with a Stalin mustache?
That would be pretty awesome.
Well, Shauna, this was your idea, and I want to thank you for kind of spearheading it and getting it all together because I think this has been a great time, and I think it's a great opportunity for you to launch your own YouTube channel. I'd be a watcher.
And when's that new novella coming out, Shauna?
It's the 14th of March, so not too long to get, just a few weeks, just in time for St. Paddy's Day. So if you want to brush up on your Irish or even how to say a few Irish names, it's a great.
Look at that. It's kicking her off here at the very, very end.
She got so excited, she froze.
Well, thank you guys so much for hanging with us. It's been a blast, and we'll talk to you next time. Let me know what authors you guys want for the next Authors Corner. It should be a fun new little series here.
Oh, you want me and Christopher and Shauna to come back? That's totally fine.
We can do that.
Yeah, cool.
Because this